Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to draw this toucan in watercolor crayons, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to answer some of the questions that have come around my new watercolor crayon course, which is now available up on my Teachable School. And during this month of April, during the launch month, I have a 50% off discount code for you, so you can find all that information in the video description. So the first question I get is, how long is the discount good for? It is good for the month of April, so grab it now if you want it. And then another question I get is, how long can I use the content in the class? This is a standalone class, so you get lifetime access. So if you wanted to buy it on sale, but you don't have time to take the class for a couple of months or a year or whatever, it doesn't matter. You have lifetime access. You can even come back to the class to refresh if you need to. So that goes for all my standalone courses, everything but Critique Club, the membership, basically. So yes, you get it for lifetime. So buy it on sale and enjoy it whenever you have the time. Another question I get is, what sort of paper should I use? Now, you do get a supply list in the class, but I will answer that now in case you're wondering if you have the supplies that you need already. Basically, any sort of toned paper that's at least, I would say, about 98 pounds or higher. So like the Canson MiTintes paper, Strathmore Artigan, you could use a Fabriano Tizzano paper. Actually, you could even use a Strathmore Mixed Media paper, which is a little bit smoother, but I also like that. I gotta say, watercolor crayons are very forgiving on a lot of surfaces. We'll also use watercolor paper, but this is a good opportunity to use up the watercolor paper that maybe you bought on sale and you didn't like too much, because the watercolor crayons will work beautifully on almost any decent surface. It doesn't have to be fantastic, it just got to be decent. In fact, what I'm working on here is actually a scrap of Matboard, because I used to do professional picture framing and I also frame my own artwork. So I always have like the windows left over from when I cut mats, and sometimes they're too small or just an awkward size. I can't get a mat out of them. I use them for watercolor crayon work because they're just a wonderful surface, and I can use them plain. Or sometimes what I like to do is actually apply clear gesso to the surface. So I get asked, do I need to buy clear gesso for this class? No, you do not. Like I said, watercolor crayons are very forgiving. If you want to, by all means, you can clear gesso and prep your papers or mat boards, but you don't need the clear gesso or the mat board to take the class. Another question I get is about the watercolor crayons themselves. So I'm kind of a big proponent of, I'm a big proponent of using what you have. So you may have something that will work in your stash already. But if you are buying new, I'm recommending the set of 15 or set of 30 Neocolor 2 crayons by Caran. Now I'm using the 15 set here in this demo because what I feel like the Neocolor 2 range, I feel like the smaller sets, like every color is really impactful and useful. So like the 15 set has pretty much everything you need. And then I do use a few colors from the 30 set. So the 30 set is also good, but I would say every color in the 15 set is essential. And then every color in the 30 set, they're valuable. They're not as valuable as those 15. Although in the 30 set, you get those 15 colors from the 15 set plus 15 different colors. So like I use the olive green and the olive green light and the russet and the gray from the 30 set. So you could definitely get those open stock if you wanted to start with the 15 set. Another alternative would be the Lyra Aquacolor crayons. I say they are like 95% as good as the Caran watercolor crayons. So if you have those already, or maybe wherever you live, the Caran Neocolors are just so much more expensive than the Lyra. Yeah, go with the Lyra. Those are good too. There's also a set called Swiss Color by Caran, which is the set that I started out with. They are half stick, and there's a couple of the colors are different from the 15 set of the Neocolor 2s, but you could definitely do the class with that set. And if you're going with a 15 set versus a 30 set, you just will have to do a little bit more mixing. And if you look on the screen right now, you're going to see just a cheap $2 plastic folding palette, and you're probably thinking, well, what is that? You're using watercolor crayons. What are those things? Those are watercolor crayon shavings. So if I find that I want to sharpen a watercolor crayon, I sharpen it into this palette, and I just put a couple drops of water on the shavings and stir it up. And I use that when I need to, either I want to do a really detail and use a brush, like I am here with that red there at the bottom of the yellow feathers, or if I want to do like a lot of color, like the black body of the bird or the yellow chest. If I want to put in a lot of color, if I have the color in my palette, because I've sharpened that color before, I'll use that. Or if I want to get detail, if I want to draw with detail, I'll sharpen the crayon and save the shavings. I've also used like pill containers from the Dollar Tree for that. You don't have to have anything expensive. You might even have like an ice cube tray kicking around your house that you can use. And I just use like an inexpensive pencil sharpener that has a large hole. Those double hole pencil sharpeners from like the Dollar Tree or Target work great. You'll need to use the big hole for these, and it does a fantastic job. And if it has a little shavings catcher, I sharpen it right into the shavings catcher and then just dump it into one of the wells on my my palette here, or in a pill box, or what have you. I find that like a 20 well palette is fine, because I usually will use one color up before I need to sharpen another color, and it just works out pretty well for me. Sometimes I like to use a crayon dry because I want the texture on the paper, and other times I want to liquefy it or even use a large amount from my palette. So it's just a great way to save and conserve your materials, because the thing about watercolor crayons is that it's 100% usable material. You don't want to waste it. It's good product. So having a little palette there, it's worth the $2 to have something that you can use to collect your shavings, so you don't have to waste it. So another question that I got about the crayons was, can I use like the Sargent Art watercolor crayons, or the Mungio watercolor crayons, or the Jane Davenport watercolor crayons, which are all actually the same product, just rebranded. Or I believe, I want to say allegedly, because, you know, I've used them all and I'd say they're all the same. Or the Dina Wakley scribble sticks. Now those, I have seen a student do one of the lessons with the Sargent Art crayons. It was one that was more of a watercolor style project, so it worked really well for that. And I'm not saying those products are bad at all, but they are hard. They're almost like a woodless watercolor pencil. So, and also watercolor pencils, those are not going to work as well for you, because they're just not going to be as opaque and put down enough pigment. So those are going to be challenging to use. However, if you have gel crayons or gelatos or any of those like kind of twist up opaque gel crayon or water-soluble oil pastel products, those will work. Now, the results will be a little bit different, but they will give you, they will work with the techniques I'm going to show you in the watercolor crayon workshop. Now, the supplies are very limited in that class. I just basically a toned paper, watercolor paper, and a set of 15 or 30 watercolor crayons. That's all we're using in the watercolor crayon workshop, in the watercolor paper. So I do like to use mixed media with my watercolor crayons, but I'm not doing that in the workshop. Like I said, we are just like really seeing everything the watercolor crayons can do. There's 8 projects that we're going to do together, and we're just using the crayons. But as you can see here, I do love mixing media. Here I'm using pan pastels in the background of this to kind of give it a little bit of, a little more texture and depth and, interest, but we're not going to be doing that in the watercolor crayon workshop. I do have videos on YouTube that we do mixed media with watercolor crayons, like using them with markers, using them with pan pastels, and I have some critique club projects where we do mixed media with them, and that's wonderful. But for the watercolor crayon workshop, I really wanted to keep the supplies limited and really just dive into what can we do with the watercolor crayons. How can you make that investment of that product really work for you? How do we fix mistakes? What are the different ways we can apply it, and that sort of thing. So if you're thinking you're going to have to go out and buy pan pastels and buy pastel pencils and buy markers and buy this and that and 10 other things, no, the supply list is literally a set of watercolor crayons, not the biggest set. If you have the biggest set, that's fine. That's great. Go ahead and use them. But if you already have water-soluble oil pastels, try them first and see what you think. Honestly, my watercolor crayon journey was the Portfolio water-soluble oil pastels first, and this was in the late 90s. And then I graduated up to the half stick of the Swiss Color Caran d'Ache watercolor crayons. And then I bit the bullet and I bought the set of 84 watercolor crayons when I found a good sale. And I do not regret any of those purchases, but I also don't think you need that big set in order to make meaningful art with these. In fact, a lot of those colors in the 84 set, like those expanded colors, I rarely reach for. I'm mainly using those colors from that first 15 color set. So I just want to make sure that you know what you're buying and you get what is going to make sense to you. If you can get the 30 set, if you can swing it, I highly recommend it. But if not, the 15 set will do. And they're just so fun. They're rewarding. I think they're a wonderful product that is so slow wearing that you can really get a lot of paintings done with a small set. I think it's a great set to introduce children into watercolor and mixed media. Honestly, actually, as a child, child, my parents found a set of the Neocolor 2 set of crayons, a set of 10 at this discount store called Martin's. And I remember the first time I scribbled with them and I added water. Now, I didn't know what a treasure I had. I just thought, these are really cool. These are so awesome. And I don't know whatever happened to that original set. Maybe I used them up. Maybe I lost them. I'm not sure because I was a really little kid. I remember like vividly because my parents were house builders and contractors. And I remember one day I was sitting in my dad's pickup truck and it was raining and my parents were out clearing brush off a lot they were going to build a house on. And I remember sitting in the truck playing with the watercolor crayons, those Caran crayons. It's like I was probably 10 and I have such a vivid memory of that. And it was just so magical to use those for the first time. Another thing I really like with these is you can use them dry and leave them dry for texture. You can use them dry and liquefy them and get like solid color. Then you can go back over with the dry crayon and get texture. Then you can go back over with the wet crayon and add detail. It's like you can layer for days with these, whether you're using a gessoed surface or you're using a planed paper. The thing I like about the Liquitex Clear Gesso, and I'm just saying Liquitex in particular because I used another brand of Clear Gesso and it just was not the same. But the Liquitex Clear Gesso almost makes the paper feel like sandpaper. Now, not as rough as sandpaper, but it does have a sandy surface to it that really lets you layer more. And when you like scumble over it, scumbling is like when you lightly go over it with the crayon, it gives you a beautiful like texture that's harder to get with plain paper. Now here I'm using a Derwent pastel pencil because the picture that I was going by, the reference photo, which I'll link in the video description, was a rainy day, and I was debating whether I wanted to do that or not. So actually, I took photos of my project before I did this. But I'm like, you know what? Whenever I feel like I'm afraid to ruin a picture, I know that I'm playing it too safe, and I should really just try it. And I loved the effect of the pastel pencil over this, just to do those light raindrops falling. And I wanted to do it with the pastel pencil and not the watercolor crayon because I knew I could smudge it out with my finger or with a Q-tip or something if I wanted to soften it a little bit. And if I went in with water to smudge it over the pan pastel, I would end up with some water spots, and I didn't want that. And I just, oh my gosh, I just really loved that. And then I thought, ooh, what about some like raindrops in front of the bird? I actually zoomed into my reference photo because it was from Unsplash and it was on my computer, so I could zoom in. And I thought, yeah, you can see some raindrops in front of the bird. And then I thought it would also be really cool to maybe use a gel pen and do some water drops on the beak. So first I started sketching it in with the pastel pencil to see if it would be bright enough. But I always kind of have that gel pen in my back pocket just in case I really want a bright white. And I could actually have used a paintbrush and diluted watercolor crayon, but I had a fine tip, just like a 0.06 millimeter gel pen, and I knew that was going to give me a super duper fine tip. Of course, on a waxy surface like that, you will have to like scribble it off on scrap paper or your hand like I do. Hopefully that doesn't have long-term health effects to get that ink flowing, but it gives you such a nice fine look that I knew it would be great for just like little touches of highlight in the eye, little water droplets and water dripping off the beak. And really that's pretty much it. And that's how I finished off the piece. So yes, for this I'm using mixed media, but we don't for the watercolor crayon class. I think that addressed all of the questions that I've received from people curious about the class. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below and I'll be happy to answer them. I know I've been very watercolor crayon heavy lately on the channel. Don't worry, I'll be working on a traditional watercolor tutorial to post probably tomorrow, or you can check out some of the, thousands of other tutorials I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope this inspires you to grab your supplies and play with them in either a mixed media fashion or just take a single supply and see what it will do. Thank you again. Please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this tutorial. And until next time, happy crafting.